This is breaking news.
Governor Phil Murphy is giving his last scheduled COVID briefing for New Jersey. Let's go to it now.
I want to start off by talking for a minute about Ukraine. First of all, we stand with the people of Ukraine unwaveringly, and we will stand with them to the end, and I hope the end is a peaceful one and it comes soon. We have established literally within the past hour our website, as you can see, nj.gov/Ukraine, and the First Lady and many others will be populating this website with information in particular about where folks can go or what organizations they can work with as it relates to shipping things either to folks in Ukraine or refugees who are leaving Ukraine. nj.gov/Ukraine, and as I say, we stand in complete, total solidarity with the people of Ukraine, with the government of Ukraine. New Jersey has one of the largest Ukrainian populations of any American state. I think we're the fourth largest behind California, New York, and Pennsylvania. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church is North American headquarters, is in New Jersey, and we stand in spirit, in prayer, and action with our Ukrainian brothers and sisters. Secondly, I cannot resist the moment to call out the thug Vladimir Putin and his kleptocracy, this war of choice. This is insanity, absolute animal, and deserves the condemnation that the world needs to bring down upon him. And lastly, words like silence, neutral, and abstain are spoken or acted by cowards who are as guilty as sin, and the blood is on their hands just as it is on Putin's. Okay, with that said, please God, for the last time, I am joined by the woman to my right, who needs no introduction, the Commissioner of Health, Judy Persichilli. To my far left, a disorienting moment here, the state's epidemiologist, Dr. Christina Tan. To the far right, in his normal spot, the Department of Health's Communicable Disease Service Medical Director, Dr. Ed Lifshitz, and to my left, the Superintendent of the State Police, Colonel Pat Callahan. We have First Lady Tammy Murphy, Chief Counsel Parimal Garg. We've got Ruth Hartnett with the microphone, Mahan Gunaratna, and we have Derek Roseman with us, and it's a treat to have him with us. We have the whole band together for what we hope is a final encore. Today marks the 2-year anniversary of our first confirmed case of COVID-19. I received the news while in bed recuperating from cancer surgery, which was performed earlier that day. For Judy, the news was a most unwelcome birthday present. Since then, counting today, we've brought you, whether here at this table or at locations throughout the state, some 257 updates on our progress in fighting the coronavirus pandemic. But this anniversary is the right time for us to end these in-person briefings. As coronavirus moves from pandemic to endemic, and as we transition away from crisis management to a more normal way of life, it is the right time. We have asked so much of each and every New Jerseyan for the past 2 years. You have overwhelmingly delivered, and then some. We're at this point only because of your dedicated work to protect yourselves, your families, and your communities. I know you are exhausted both mentally and physically and ready to return to normal, and let there be no doubt, so are we. We persevered and fought some more. That's why we're at this point today. With all we have done to ensure the preparedness of our healthcare system, and with the advent of both the vaccines and treatments, we are ready to move forward and not to live our lives in fear. Now, before we get to the numbers, we do have an announcement. As we announced a month ago, the statewide school and daycare mask mandate is being lifted effective this Monday, so in 3 days, March 7. Today, I will be signing the executive order to formally make this so. The school and daycare masking requirement was the last major mitigation measure we had in place, and because of that, the order I will sign also as of Monday, this coming Monday, March 7th, lift the public health emergency that I declared in January when Omicron was hitting its peak. Like today's briefing, this action marks the end of this phase in our war against the coronavirus as we make the transition from pandemic to endemic. Because we are committed to continuing our efforts to vaccinate, test, and coordinate the healthcare system's response, this order will continue existing orders, directives, and waivers related to those areas. It will also maintain the normal state of emergency that allows for statewide management of the COVID-19 response, and which I declared on March 9th, 2020. Like the state of emergency that was declared in the aftermath of Superstorm Sandy by then Governor Chris Christie in 2012, and by the way, which remains in effect to this day, this authority allows us to receive and distribute federal funding without any unnecessary red tape or bureaucratic obstacles. And like the state of emergency for Sandy, which most of you probably did not know remained in effect, maintaining this one will not impact your daily life in one even small way. But make no mistake, given the enormous progress we have made, the time when large-scale mitigation measures were necessary has passed and hopefully will never return. Switching gears, I want to give a quick shout out to these two guys, members of the U.S. Paralympic team from New Jersey preparing for competition in Beijing. Sled hockey defenseman Josh Pauls on the left from Greenbrook, and Franklin Lake's Jack Wallace, who plays forward on the same sled hockey team, on the right. We wish them and all of Team USA the very, very best. And with that, Judy, let's do our final run-through of the numbers. We'll start with a look at hospitalizations, which continue to tail off and get back to the levels they were prior to Omicron. And with newly reported cases, we're also seeing the positivity rate dropping down below 3% on several days, including under 2% today. Vaccinations, and importantly boosters, continue their sure and steady climb. Not as fast as we'd like, but they're going in the right direction. And the latest numbers on breakthrough cases changes nothing of what we've been saying over the past 8 months that we've been bringing you this data. Getting vaccinated and boosted dramatically decreases your chances of severe COVID that could lead to hospitalization or death. Switching quickly to look at the situation in our schools as we prepare for Monday's lifting of the in-school masking requirement, the number of cases of in-school transmission over the past 2 weeks is in a very good place. And the rates of infection overall for students and educators, regardless of where the exposure occurred, is now back to where it had been trending from September up until Omicron showed up. Here are the latest numbers, sadly, of confirmed COVID-related deaths. Again, these are the deaths that were confirmed on those dates, not necessarily, in fact, not the folks who passed on those dates. Even though these briefings are ending, we will continue to provide these numbers through our online dashboard on a daily basis. This includes a new page for breakthrough cases, which will be updated weekly. I know Judy will be able to provide a little bit more color on that one. We will also provide some numbers on a weekly basis through our social media channels. And let's now, for the final time, remember 3 of those who have been lost. And today, all 3 are lives lost in the earliest days of the pandemic in April of 2020. First up, this woman, Bayonne's Marie Perron, known by many, if not most, as Ari, especially to her loved ones. She was 87 years old. Born in neighboring Jersey City, she had a lifetime love of animals. Marie, or Ari, spent as much of her free time as she could in Atlantic City playing the slot machines, and if she wasn't there, she was probably somewhere singing along with doo-wop music on the radio. With her passing, Ari is reunited with her late husband, Joseph. She left her daughters, Joanne and Maria, and I had the great honor of speaking with Maria last week, and Maria's husband, Jimmy, along with 5 grandchildren and 7 great-grandchildren. a New Jersey original. May God bless and watch over her memory and the family she leaves behind. Next up, this man, Anthony Manfrey. He was 73 years old and had called Freehold home since his retirement from the New York City Police Department. Anthony, by the way, was also a proud Vietnam veteran. After the move to Freehold, Anthony ran his own limousine business, though he preferred time driving solo or with his wife, Rosemary, by his side in his Mercedes convertible with the top down. A few of the constants in Anthony's life were a good dirty martini, you gotta love that, a Sunday dinner of macaroni and gravy, and the New York Yankees, and I'm sure he would not be happy with the state of baseball today. Remembering him are Rosemary and their 3 children, Anthony, Kimberly, and Danielle, along with their families. I had the great honor of speaking with Rosemary and Kimberly last week, and you talk about tragedy. Kimberly not only lost her dad, but she lost her husband to COVID at around the same time. We know Anthony has found a place where the sun is shining and the top of the car is down, and may God bless and watch over him and the family he leaves behind. And finally, we remember the guy on the right there, South Orange's Rohel Cosio Empiston, known by everybody as Ro. He was raised in Jersey City after coming to this country at the age of 4 with his father from their native Philippines. A standout wrestler at St. Peter's Prep, he went on to receive a degree in accounting from Pace University. He spent his entire career at the New York accounting firm of Geller and Company, and Ro was just 50 years old. As you could see, he was a family man all around. He left his wife in the center of 11 years, Jessie. I had the great honor of speaking with her last week. She also had COVID, thank God. She's in a better place. And he also left behind his 2 children. You could see there, Gaia, who was 10, and Miles, who was 7, of whom he was rightfully very proud. Ro was so proud of the career opportunity he was given because of his college education that Jessie established a scholarship fund in his honor at his alma mater, Pace University. That is a fine, lasting legacy. We're honored that Ro was part of our New Jersey family, and may God bless him and watch over his memory and his blessed family he leaves behind. Marie, Anthony, and Ro are the final 3 of the 646 New Jerseyans we have honored in these briefings. They in turn represent only a small fraction of all those who this virus has taken away. We began our practice of telling their stories when we had to make the hard decision to keep families and friends from gathering for funerals. In lieu of those somber ceremonies, we turned these few minutes of our regular briefings into that time of remembrance. We mourned not just as individual families or communities, but as an entire state. Between April 3rd and July 3rd, 2020, we lowered our flags to half-staff as we remembered all lost in that powerful first rave. Even after the restriction limiting funeral attendance was lifted, along with our flags, we continued bringing you these pictures and stories. Every life lost to COVID was worth honoring and remembering, and we endeavored to tell as many as we could. And by the way, these slides show the picture of every single one of the 646 folks who we have lost, who we memorialized. We never wanted any life reduced to being just a number, and so we were in that crazy position, and frankly, we are still in it, where you've got to make health decisions based on the numbers, the science, the data, the facts, but you could at the same time never let it only to be about numbers. We had to remember, and we have to remember, each and every one of these lives we've lost and the families they left behind. For all of these 646 folks that we have honored in these briefings, I have called each and every one of their families, speaking with well more than 1,000 family members. They told me stories and brought me in on inside family stories and jokes. Some calls were lighthearted, and we laughed together over happy memories, and many were brutal and somber, and we cried together over what had been lost. And all are forever in my memory and our memory. We honor them still. We honor each and every single one. Hard to believe. Of the more than 30,000 lives we've lost. So for all of them, let's do one final moment of silence. One of the other regular features of our briefings was to put a spotlight on a small business or community-based organization whose future was put in doubt by the pandemic, but who found partnership and a lifeline through one of the many financial support programs we offered. Many of these stories came from the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, which has done nothing less than truly heroic and historic work with our small businesses, arts, and nonprofit communities. The EDA not only modified pre-existing programs to support the state's small businesses, but they also created and implemented numerous entirely new programs. In total, the EDA injected nearly $850 million into small businesses up and down the state. All in all, they awarded more than 80,500 grants. And their innovative and groundbreaking Sustain and Serve program, which by the way became a national model, drove the purchase of more than 4 million meals from hard-hit restaurants, which went to New Jerseyans experiencing food insecurity. Perhaps more than anything, Sustain and Serve was our greatest win-win. But others also contributed greatly to our economic response and recovery. The Department of Labor created its Return and Earn program to pair unemployed workers with small businesses looking to fill the positions they need to fill, to grow, to thrive, and lead our economic recovery. Employers received up to $10,000 in wage subsidies to hire and train new employees, and in turn, new employees received a direct $500 return to work benefit. The Department of Community Affairs put $2.6 million into grants delivered through its Neighborhood Preservation COVID-19 relief program that helped downtowns stay open and stay welcoming. And the New Jersey Redevelopment Authority's $6 million Small Business Lease Emergency Assistance Grant Program assisted more than 1,000 businesses located in the 64 communities in which it works. We've brought you 154 stories of businesses we partner with to keep them open, creating jobs and serving their communities. And just as importantly, I hope we inspired you to support the local small businesses in your community. Bear with me 1 second here. Sorry. Before I close and turn things over to the woman who needs no introduction, I want to give thanks to some of the folks who have made these briefings what they've been. Certainly, first and foremost, to my partners up here at the table, Judy and Pat especially, who have been with me for nearly every single one of these briefings. Tina on the left, Ed on the right, who have made a terrific tag team of expertise. In absentia, I don't want Eddie Bresnitz to think we forgot about him. He was awesome for us for a while. Thank you all not only for helping us to educate and inform, but even more for all of you and your teams, what you did throughout the course of the past 2 years to direct our response. I cannot express in words my gratitude to each of you. I also want to thank the tremendous team here at the Trenton War Memorial, who allowed us to set up shop in this ballroom and will basically never leave. To the team from the Office of Information Technology and Office of Innovation, who brought you the live stream every day, built the websites, gave us an edge in technology and communications unlike any others. Thank you. Thank you as well to the folks in the back who host the sign language translators, who ensured that every New Jerseyan, not most, but every New Jerseyan, could be a part of this process. I thank everyone within the governor's office who took time out of their days to make these briefings happen as well. Derek Roseman, who I mentioned, who helped craft the words we've spoken over these past 2 years and still does. He and I are working on the budget speech this afternoon together. Meet Patel is a guy you probably never saw, who spoke to literally every one of those 1,000 family members that I spoke to separately. To each and every one of them, and I want to give a particular shout out to First Lady Tammy Murphy, who's with us today. I also want to thank the members of the media who came and reported out the news that we made here. Over the course of the past 2 years, you ready for this? We counted. You asked us a total of 6,211 questions. 6,210 of them were from Alex. And by the way, some of the questions were even on topic, so we thank you, folks. Before I turn things over for the final time to the woman who needs no introduction, I have to thank again each and every one of you out there watching. You put in the hard work. And as we move to this next phase, all I could say is this: be safe, be smart, enjoy the upcoming spring and warmer weather, enjoy getting together with family and friends, and one last time, don't be a knucklehead. With that, please help me welcome the woman who needs no introduction, the Commissioner of the Department of Health, Judy Persichilli.
Thank you, Governor, and good afternoon. On this, the last of our regular COVID-19 press conferences, I want to start by saying a special word of thanks to Dr. Tan and Dr. Lifshitz and the entire team at the Department's Communicable Disease Service for their expertise and tireless efforts since they first became aware in early January of 2020 of an outbreak of what was then referred to as the Wuhan pneumonia. Throughout this pandemic, while we were all monitoring COVID, this team, the CDS team, was remaining vigilant and also monitoring, for example, an Ebola outbreak in the Congo and assessing travelers at the Newark Liberty International Airport. They were instrumental in helping us with immunizations of Afghan refugees at the Joint Base. And they remained vigilant every single day, keeping a watchful eye on other contagions nationally, statewide, and internationally. As the governor said 2 years ago today, we confirmed our first case. This was a novel virus, never before seen in humans. We knew very little about the virus. You may recall the Strategic National Stockpile of protective equipment was empty. Our supply was scarce. We had limited testing capacity and had no alternative care sites to assist hospitals with overflow patients. We lacked a centralized data analysis and reporting team, and we had limited dashboard capability. We did not have a Department of Health call center. Most importantly, early in the pandemic, we had absolutely no knowledge of asymptomatic spread of this virus and limited understanding and treatment options for patient management. So we have made incredible progress since those dark days 2 years ago. We continue to learn more about the virus even to this day, and we now have an array of therapeutic and clinical treatments. We strengthened our local public health infrastructure, committing $90 million in COVID funding to counties, cities, and local health departments. We developed a Department of Health data nerve center and data analysis and reporting hub. We brought up a bi-directional call center that fielded 5.6 million calls. We learned the value of partnerships at the federal, state, and local level as we augmented public health investigation capacity. And with the support of the Army Corps of Engineers, we stood up alternative care sites, including 3 field medical stations and multiple hospital-based sites. We followed the science and made decisions based on data and always through an equity lens, recognizing that social determinants of health disproportionately impacted communities of color. We learned the resiliency of our healthcare partners. We learned the overwhelming importance of clear communications, engagement with stakeholders, and arming the public with information and education. The result of our efforts have been one of the best vaccination programs in our country. There are many reasons for this success. First and foremost, the hard work of our vaccination partners, the willingness of so many residents to get vaccinated, constant communication with the public and stakeholders, and transparency through dashboards, the COVID Information Hub, and the call center. Because of our vaccination partners and those willing to be vaccinated, currently 92% of eligible individuals ages 5 and up in New Jersey have received at least 1 dose. 78% of those age and up age 5 and up have completed their primary series, and 54% of those who are eligible are boosted. So now the challenge before us is to define the new normal as we expect COVID-19 to remain with us. We need to stay vigilant and integrate all that we have learned into our everyday practices and processes. We must remain focused on our most vulnerable residents. It is likely that we will continue to have surges in COVID-19 activity, so it will be important that we all continue to be aware of the activity levels and adjust our behaviors accordingly. CDC has recommendations for precautions people should take based on their personal risks in the context of COVID activity levels. We will set targets in terms of disease burden and severity using COVID community levels. With the CDC, we will continue to monitor the capacity of our healthcare system as well as hospitalization data. And we will continue our ongoing efforts in identifying emerging variants. And we will continue to look at syndromic surveillance and wastewater surveillance as possible early indicators of increasing disease. So today, the Communicable Disease Service added a new feature to NJ COVID-19 dashboard titled COVID-19 Cases by Vaccination Status. The new page under the Case and Mortality Summaries tab displays weekly COVID-19 case, hospitalization, and death rates for unvaccinated persons, those who have completed their primary series, and those with a booster dose. The chart at the top of the new page has a drop-down menu that allows you to select between cases, hospitalizations, or deaths. Weekly rates are displayed by vaccination status. Each of the charts shows significant protection for those who are up to date, and that includes boosters. It includes comparisons of the risk of COVID-19 infection among unvaccinated individuals with those who have completed their primary series, with or without a booster. In the 4 weeks between January 3rd and February 19th, unvaccinated individuals had 4 times the risk of infection with COVID-19 compared to fully vaccinated individuals with a booster dose. It also includes a table summarizing cumulative vaccine breakthrough cases. This new feature will be updated weekly on Wednesdays. So as always, as we continue to promote our mission to help all New Jersey residents live long, healthy lives, and that will include controlling COVID illness, limiting mortality, and doing it equitably. We will support public health and health systems to recognize and care for the overall impact of the pandemic on individuals suffering from long COVID, PTSD among healthcare and essential workers and the population at large, and we shall remain vigilant about the mental health and wellness of all New Jerseyans, especially our children. We must continue to promote public awareness and science-based information and respond rapidly to transmission hotspots. Similar to the Department of Communicable Disease Service, the nursing profession is also grounded in a science-based body of study that moves that science from the classroom to the bedside, into the communities, and most importantly, into our schools. So to more than 200,000 nurses in our state, I thank you. On behalf of all the people of New Jersey, we owe you a tremendous debt of gratitude for your work and support caring for patients, students, and their families. That gratitude and thanks also extends to the hundreds of physicians, pharmacists, technicians, and aides, and all frontline workers who all work together to promote the health and wellness of our state. As we continue our work, it is with gratitude also to all New Jerseyans for the work you have all done, and I know will continue to do, and sincere thanks to the Department of Health's Pandemic Response Team, and to Governor Murphy, a governor who relies on science and data, and I know will continue to work with the department as we integrate COVID surveillance and response into our ongoing work. We'll never forget the tragedy of this pandemic and the lives lost and the family and loved ones impacted, including members of our own Department of Health family. However, at the same time, we will be reminded of how the pandemic brought out the best in many of us, demonstrating our collective interest in protecting the public, particularly among the most vulnerable, and also our unrelenting, ongoing resiliency. So now, lastly, please remember, continue to wash your hands frequently, practice respiratory hygiene, physically distance, stay home when you're sick, and get vaccinated and boosted to protect yourselves, your families, your friends, and our children. Thank you.
Judy, a tour de force on behalf of your fellow 9.3 million members in your New Jersey family. Thank you for everything. And I would underscore as well 2 comments. Number 1, thanking the healthcare workers. Judy, remember, is the first nurse ever to serve as health commissioner in the state of New Jersey's history. Instead of all the nurses and more broadly all the other healthcare and frontline workers. And secondly, the notion that this has brought out the best in so many. Let's never forget that as well. Thank you. Okay, Pat, and a little bit of Judy. I have to say this. I know your brother, Matt. He's one of the team at Operating Engineers Local 825. I've seen him all over the state. I only recently learned that he and his buddies at 825 have never missed a briefing.
That's true.
And they watch it usually from Ron's Landmark and Netcom. So to Matt and Ron and the whole crew, huge thanks. That's pretty incredible. And if that weren't enough, I also learned that one of Judy's dreams in life is to ride a bulldozer. And that Matt, his brother Matt, is going to make that your dream and your birthday wish come true this spring. So you never know. I learn something every day. Pat, what do we have for weather? I think it's good and warm. I know you've got some folks to thank, some lessons learned. Thank you for everything you've done. Take it away.
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon. It's supposed to be a decent weekend weather-wise. A little bit of rain, but I think we might hit a record high on Sunday, maybe low 70s, which will boost all of our spirits well. We also will be activating the State Emergency Operations Center this weekend to monitor that Freedom Convoy, and just from a situational awareness standpoint and from a reporting out and making sure that we're briefed and aware, trusting that that goes safely and that everybody adheres to certainly the rules of our highways and byways. Just a few reflections, Gov, to your point, echoing some of both yours and the Commissioner's. One reminder is that during the past 2 years, we had several natural disasters that hit us at the same time. Orlean, Isaias, Henri. I remember the same week that Ida hit us with both catastrophic flooding and tornadoes in the south that we were just starting to accept, which would end up being more than 16,000 Afghanistan refugees at Joint Base McGuire during a pandemic, and watching that city come up overnight. Again, pretty special that no one anticipated during an unprecedented pandemic. But to your point, I think that call to action across our state when medical personnel, supplies, equipment, treatments were non-existent. And then it made us reflect on what could we do better and how are we better. Just a few points, and certainly way beyond this, the ability to scale up operations across anything: testing, vaccinations, mortuary affairs, hospital capacities, just-in-time training, increase in those hospital capacities due to the build-outs by the Army Corps of Engineers, PPE stockpile that now stands at over 140 million pieces of equipment and items for critical needs that are strategically located throughout the state. I think a lot of, in the early on, everybody did wait to hear what the violations were across the state with regards to executive orders, but in the big scheme of things, there was very few that were not compliant, and the overwhelming New Jerseyans complied with what we had asked them to comply with. When we asked for donations, our phone lines got shut down because so many New Jerseyans stepped up on PPE, gowns and gloves, and we had to go to an online system to coordinate that. Even up to and including when we asked, we tried to hit that goal for vaccinations, and we were surpassed that even in advance of our goal. And just a few, not only of all of emergency management, federal, state, county, local, our enlisted and civilian members that spent every day of the week just trying to coordinate and mitigate the challenges that we were up against. Especially that all hazards incident management team, which still continues to function, not just the state police team, health, National Guard, corrections, just from all departments across the state, and whatever we ask them to do, vaccine operations, testing, mortuary affairs, hospitals, partnered with our leaders. I think they did 14 community-based vac sites, and 10 of those were in some of our hardest hit communities. And just a few more thanks. FEMA, can't say enough about that relationship, which was phenomenal. I think it serves between us and Region 2 as a model for the rest of the nation. Department of Defense that sent medical staff when we were hurting, Army Corps of Engineer again, and the National Guard to General Howe and her crew every step of the way, whether that was helping out and cleaning long-term care, testing sites, field medical stations, every single step of the way to have the National Guard and sometimes service men and women from across the country to meet folks from Michigan or from Texas that came here to support our efforts. Just phenomenal, and all of our volunteers. So I'll just close with really thanking you, Governor, certainly Commissioner Persichilli, and the 9.3 million New Jerseys that entrusted OEM, our enlisted and civilian members, to be a part of a team during an unprecedented time. It was certainly, personally and professionally, one of the most humbling honors of my life and career. So I thank you, Governor.
I would echo those last words without fail. Also, many of those organizations, the federal ones in particular, we worked just as successfully in one administration as we did the next across the political aisle. People left politics at the door and did the right thing in so many ways. So thank you, Pat, personally, to you and your extraordinary team, General Howe and the extraordinary team at the Guard, our federal partners, county and local folks who are with us every step of the way, just extraordinary leadership across the board. I haven't thanked him in a while, but I also want to thank publicly George Helmy, Chief of Staff in my office, who's been an extraordinary leader during this every single day, every single step of the way. We're going to start over here for a change. I'd like to ask you if you could literally give me one or two each, because we don't have time for a long list from each of you, and I appreciate, again, what I said earlier, I mean it. Even when we haven't agreed with the premise of your question or where you were headed, you all have done an extraordinary job in the press getting the story out, and that's probably saved a lot of lives as a result of that. So let's start with Daniel. You're up.
Good afternoon, Governor.
Good afternoon.
My understanding is that many administrative orders, waivers, and directives rely on the state's public health emergency. What are some of the measures that you said that you want to keep in place, and how? Will the end of the public health emergency disrupt any hospitals or vaccine sites that rely on some of those measures? And also, any reaction to the Senate yesterday passing a resolution critical of unemployment backlogs or opening up state offices?
Yeah. So on the first one, I think maybe it makes sense for Paramel, who's right behind you, and you to talk offline. But basically, we have two sets of emergencies that are in effect. One of which is a state of emergency, which can be open-ended. It doesn't need to be renewed. And as I mentioned, the one related to Superstorm Sandy is still, in fact, outstanding. And that's for good reason, because believe it or not, sadly, for good reason, people still aren't back in their homes. There's still federal matters, et cetera. The one that The other one had to be renewed, the public health emergency, every 30 days. And that had a whole series of things associated with it, most overwhelmingly the school mask mandate. So we're lifting that as of Monday, and we sat around and said, you know what, there's no reason even to go to the 11th of March, which is when it otherwise would have expired. The big thrust of this was that school mask mandate, so we're going to pull it as of Monday. But to allow Judy and Pat and others to continue vaccination programs, testing programs, again, eligibility in a non-bureaucratic way for federal funds, we want to make sure those elements are still in place, and that we will accomplish that by this. Listen, there is an enormous, and there has been an enormous amount of frustration by folks who have not been able to get to a positive resolution on their unemployment claim. And I hear it all the time. I hear it on Ask the Governor. I hear it from men and women on the street. I hear it through the commissioner. There's just no question about that. And if folks are out there frustrated because they do not have a rightful resolution, I'm frustrated with them. And so I get that completely. I know the commissioner, Rob Angelo, is committed to getting all of these claims resolved one way or the other. Some of them are very complicated. As I've said this many times here before, these are a lot of issues. They're very rare is there a broad system or a broad category challenge. I know there's a human nature thirst to having a physical presence across the table from you. I don't know that it shortens at all the resolution of the claim, but I do know there's a human nature sort of comfort from that. And I think we'll have the unemployment function back in our one-stops effective, I think, March 28th of this month, so three weeks from Monday. And we'll continue to work with the legislature. I don't think any state, this is no solace to somebody who's frustrated and it has not been resolved. There's no state that's batted at a higher batting average or done this more efficiently than New Jersey. I know folks hear that and say, oh my God. The problem is in the federal system is overwhelmingly antiquated and not fit for the times we're in. And we're one of the few states in a pilot with the feds to try to get that as updated and refreshed as possible. Thank you. Brent.
Good afternoon. Does the end of the health emergency mean the remaining mask mandates in state government buildings, health settings, and transit are gone? If it's passed, would you sign the new bill that would end the self-serve gas ban in New Jersey and allow a hybrid model? And do you have any personal investments with ties to the Russian government?
On the last one, we do not. So we can take that off the list, thankfully. Listen, on self-service gas, that's been sort of a political third rail in New Jersey, which I have historically not crossed. But I think given that gas prices on average have now gone over $4 a gallon, I'm not necessarily signing up for that because I need to understand what impact it would have on that. But I will say more broadly, we're committed to finding any way we can make this state right now, particularly given this crisis and this war of choice by the thug Putin, any way we can make this state more affordable. I meant to say this, by the way, and sorry, on the mask mandate in state buildings, yeah, I think you should assume that's going to be dealt with sooner than later. I think we want to get through Monday in the school mask mandate, but in the state buildings, it's why we're still wearing them when we come in and out, because this is a state building. But I don't think you should assume. I don't want to make news, Judy, but I don't think that's going to last a whole lot longer. You didn't ask this, but you mentioned it. We're incredibly proud of New Jersey's role in the Afghan refugee reality. Just to reiterate, I'm proud to be wearing the Ukrainian flag beside the American flag. I sent a letter to President Biden raising our hand. I want early on for the president and his administration to know we've done it, we did it successfully, and we'll do it again for our Ukrainian brothers and sisters. Thank you. You good? Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Please.
Just two. What do you think of the fundamental changes COVID has wrought on...
So I can't, sorry?
I'm sorry. What do you think of the fundamental changes COVID has wrought on New Jersey's workforce and their quality of life? And two, now that you're ending they're entering the endemic phase, are you going to begin the examination you've been promising to do what went wrong in long-term care? And if not, when and how long do the case numbers need to go before we do the study?
Yeah, I don't have a precise answer, but we've committed very much to doing a postmortem, and that will include long-term care. We hired a firm, by the way, back in April or May of 2020, a Manat firm, to do an independent assessment of where we were deficient in terms of laws, executive orders, behavior in our long-term care centers. That's almost 2 years ago. We actually already did that. And Judy, to her credit, took a lot of courage to do that, because you're holding a mirror up to the state. And I've signed a lot of laws and executive orders since then as a result of that report. But more broadly, as a postmortem, I don't have a specific. By the way, I'd love to say that we're by our last briefing, this is over. It's come to an end. It's not, right? So we think we can responsibly live a normal life with COVID. But an endemic means it remains in our midst. The flu is still with us 104 years after the pandemic of 1918. Your first, how did it impact the workplace?
What do you think of the fundamental changes COVID has wrought on New Jersey's workforce and the quality of life?
And quality of life?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's to be determined. I ask corporations, universities, I ask our own teams, nonprofits, other institutions, what does work look like going forward? And I think it is to be determined. I think there's largely going to be a back to work, but I think there'll be a flexibility, if I had to predict, that will be with us for a while, if not forever. That would be my early sense. Thank you. Elise, good to see you.
Thank you. What is your view of legislation that would preclude New Jersey from having any business interactions with Russia? Thank you.
I'm strongly in support of it, without the specific opining on the, or opining rather on the specifics. Strongly in favor, and I give Senator Paul Sarlo a huge shout out and a lot of credit. Between that prospective bill, which really, Paramount, if you correct me if I'm wrong, has overwhelmingly to do with how we invest in pension funds and at the Investment Council, between that and the Executive Order 291 from the other day, which I signed, which instructs every aspect of the state to review any Russia-related licenses, contracts, other relationships. We want to take the relationships with anything Russia to zero, literally to zero. Some of that's more easily said than done, but that's our objective, and that's where it's going to end up. And by the way, let me just say this, that there is evidence that there are literally tens of millions of Russian people who do not support this war. So this is not directed at Russian people, it's directed at the Russian regime under the thug Vladimir Putin. Alex, I think, is this gentleman beside you got a question? Are you good? Okay, he's with you. Okay, Alex, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Commissioner, you said earlier that you were on the lookout for surges of COVID-19. At this point, with the numbers so low, what would a surge of COVID look like, numbers-wise, and what kind of actions would you take to mitigate that? Are we going to be going back to any sort of masking, lockdown restrictions in a relatively small surge? Colonel, since you're head of OEM, what was the condition of the pandemic response plan in March of 2020 when you presumably first looked it up? And have you updated that plan? If so, how? Governor,
one more.
Governor, I've consistently asked you if you feel you've made any mistakes. Since you've only said that you wish the Trump administration told you sooner about the severity of this thing, do you have any regrets? Do you regret mandating that COVID patients be allowed to go back to nursing homes, sending thousands of them to their deaths? Do you regret the failures in the unemployment
I got your
system?
question, Alex. Thank you. Ruth, we're good there. Don't say stuff, Alex, that you know is false. So we didn't, quote unquote, send people back to their death. What do you get out of that? Judy was crystal clear. I was crystal clear. And when I say crystal clear, about the protocols for folks returning to long-term care, and you know that. So let's have a responsibility here. You know that we said you needed to be in a separate floor, wing, or building, that the staff who took care of you had to be segregated as well into that same floor, wing, or building. And you know that we also said if you could not accomplish either of those, raise your hand and tell us, and we will help these folks find their home. Judy also reminded us way back when that these were their residences. This is where they lived. This was not like they were going by choice to a hotel or something. So you know how that worked, and my answer beyond that is where it is. Pat, any comment on OEM update plans, and Judy on surges?
We annually update what we call our emergency operations plans, Alex. I think the lessons from H1N1 and from Ebola have us constantly and continuously, but if offline, if you want to either stop up at my office or go to the Rock, I'll take you through what that process looks like.
That's probably worth doing. And Judy, anything on what you think a surge looks like? In fact, we had this conversation earlier today. I think, may I just say this, that this is a very good question. There will be surges, just like there are with the flu, right? Ed referred to what a bad flu season looked like a year plus ago, or almost a year ago. And so please, Judy.
So we're going to look at our Cali scores, and also the CDC has put out a new scoring model that looks at cases per 100,000, hospital capacity, and staff beds in our hospitals. What we're learning is, particularly many people that are vaccinated and boosted, they may be getting breakthrough infection, but it's not impacting the healthcare system. So at the end of the day, if we can take care of people in their homes through primary care, and the healthcare system is not overburdened, we would not have to implement anything significant. But if the healthcare system becomes overburdened, for example, if the staff beds are an issue because the healthcare providers are getting sick, then we would have to make some accommodations. So we'll continue Cali and CDC.
On the long-term care, one thing I want to add to this, which we've added before. Unfortunately and sadly, not all operators behaved in the way that we mandated that they should operate. And they have either been fined, some action taken, whether it's by Department of Health or the Attorney General or whatever it might be. So thank you for that. Let's go to Joey, if we could.
Good afternoon, Governor. Just one thing. So you've got your executive order about Russian interactions with New Jersey, and you said that you support Senator Sarlo's bill. Do you think that those two actions combined are sort of enough to deal with New Jersey's role in this interaction? And if not, what else might you plan on doing legislatively or with your own colleagues?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'll give you an incomplete answer. We're looking at everything right now. So that website is going to include how you can donate, how you can help. We're, as I mentioned already to Elisa's question, bringing the whole range of potential relations, whether it's an investment, a contract, or whatever, with Russian entities to zero. We've been back and forth on roles that we can play more broadly. I'm going to be at a big Ukrainian community center tomorrow. Strengthening the community here, spending a fair amount of time with diplomatic representatives privately, both praising and criticizing votes that have been taken. As a former ambassador, I guess I've got a speck of credibility in that respect. But I think it's fair to say, and Pat's been a part of this, we're going to continue, Tammy has been a part of the donation side, we're going to continue to try to figure out any steps that we can take, including accepting happily, not happily because of the root cause, but happily in the sense they've got to go somewhere, refugees, and all that would go with that. For instance, Judy and her team played an enormously important role with the Afghan refugees. You'd have Department of Education involved in a big way. You'd have probably our military bases, National Guard, State Police, Human Services. So there'd be a whole range. So we're looking across the board at all of that. And I mentioned earlier, in response to sort of, again, partly to Elisa's question, affordability, which was an issue before this invasion, has now become an even more acute challenge, and we're kicking the tires across the board on that. I'm told that's Katie, but I can barely see you. Hi, Katie.
Hi, Jim. Has New Jersey received any of the new treatments in pill form that can be prescribed to people who test positive? Are any New Jersey sites going to be part of the test and treat program that President Biden announced on Wednesday?
Yeah, the answer in the second one is absolutely. I don't know that we have a number yet, but test and treat will be, when it opens, I think Jeff Zients at the White House said there would be hundreds of locations nationally, so we would get our, if New Jersey's fair share usually is you take 3% of whatever the American amount is. So if it's 300, my guess is we'll have plus or minus 10. How about these are the new antiviral pills and whatnot. Have you got any update on that, Judy?
Well, we do get our fair share. We get an allocation. We've identified areas within the state, throughout the whole state, that have the full regimen of therapeutics. As you know, some were not as effective against Omicron as we would like, and then others were more effective, and that became somewhat scarce. I also just recently got a report that Evelshade, which is for immunocompromised transplant patients, perhaps patients with multiple sclerosis, that we do have an adequate supply in the state. And we're hoping that physicians will make sure that their patients that are appropriate for Evelshade take advantage of it.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Kenny. Ken, with my favorite mask.
For the record, I also have one of my home states, so. And I know this was a theme throughout the briefing. How will this experience help you for the next health crisis, and what lessons will you take in putting a plan together? Where are things in terms of closing the gap in the racial disparities when it comes to vaccination and testing? And will any of those strategies transfer over to other disparities? And then my final question, you keep saying that we are transitioning from a pandemic to an endemic, but an expert that I spoke with yesterday said the numbers don't indicate that we're close to an endemic. Are you seeing something in the data, or is some of your colleagues seeing something in the data, or how are you classifying the next phase as an endemic, even though we're very much in the thick of it?
The last question will give us a chance to get Tina and Ed to get some of their money's worth by showing up today, so thank you for asking it. Listen, what have we learned and what can we apply to the next health crisis? My guess is that's a long answer that we're going to be building. Not only have we already built to some extent on it, but we're going to be doing that, I would guess, in the future as well. I do think we were caught as a nation flat-footed in terms of supply of stuff, whether it's to Katie's question, an antiviral, monoclonal antibodies, vaccines, testing, PPE, ventilators. I feel very good about the vibrations I'm hearing from the White House and the federal administration. I feel very good with the folks on either side of me in terms of building a wall, and it's not just scale, it needs to have instantaneous ability to get to the point of attack. My guess is it's a much longer, more complicated list, and we'll all be turning that over. On racial disparities in vaccinations, we've made progress, but we're not to the point where I think Judy or her team or I would find acceptable. It's just a grind. We're closer on the Latino side than we are on the Black New Jerseyan side. It's a work in progress. We can get you the offline. We'll get you the details. I would think you probably agree with that?
Yeah, we're about 17.5% of the individuals that have received vaccinations are of Hispanic, identify as Hispanic origin, and we're about 8.6% of the African American population. 8.6% of the individuals that got vaccinations identify as African American or Black.
So
we'd like that to be higher.
Yeah, I mean, the 17.5 is up against about 20% in terms of the representation of the population. The 8.6 is up against 12-ish,
That's right.
I believe. So 17.5 out of 20 is better than 8.6 out of 12, and neither one of them is where we want to be. Lastly, Tina and then Ed, thank you to each of you and your teams for extraordinary service over the past 2 years. And by the way, it's not like we're shutting down and going home. You'll continue to serve. But any color or comment on pandemic to endemic, and then Ed, if you could.
Sure. First, thank you, Governor, and to the Commissioner for your leadership over these last several years. And, we certainly appreciate all the support toward public health. I don't think a lot of people really understood what public health was, prior to this pandemic, and we really do appreciate that visibility.
Same right back.
So defining endemic, is still a work in progress. for example, as the commissioner had mentioned, CDC had just recently modified its community transmission indicators to reflect a lot of the changing nature and changing elements of what has been going on during the pandemic. You know, now, for example, the CDC community indicators are more reflective of elements such as severity of disease, for example, because we have a lot of things that we now have now that unfortunately we didn't have at the beginning of the pandemic, such as you know, an effective vaccine, such as a better understanding of how the virus works, better therapeutics, better treatment elements. That said, endemic, as we're trying to work out what that really means, the concept of living with the virus and learning to live with the virus, you know, that really does encompass this ongoing need for us to take that personal responsibility in terms of, you know, understanding our risk, recognizing that risk is a multifactorial type of concept to embrace, that we have to, you know, take a lot of introspection as well to understand that in the context of what we understand of the science, because that really is the nature of living with the virus, you know, being willing to be flexible, to adapt to, you know, all the changes and the new information that we're learning about the virus so that we can understand what our personal risks are and then take those measures. We already know what they are, you know, the everyday preventive measures, getting vaccinated, to take those steps to promote the healthy behaviors that promote a healthy community.
Thank you for that, and thank you for your very gracious words. Same right back to you. Ed, welcome.
Thank you. You've heard a lot about how we're in a much better position now than we were 2 years ago, and that is incredibly true. Everything from vaccination to treatments to understanding mitigation factors and what works and what doesn't work puts us in other natural immunity. We are in, you know, an incredibly better position than we were 2 years ago. As has been mentioned, we're moving from a pandemic phase to a more endemic phase. That doesn't mean that we're putting out a sign that says mission accomplished and the virus is gone and it's not going to cause us any issues or problems down the road. While we have 5% of the cases that we did from just a couple of months ago, you know, we're still seeing 1,000 cases a day or so in New Jersey, which is still a lot of cases, and unfortunately people are continuing to die from this. Even, for example, in a supposedly much more mild Omicron surge, where in 2 weeks we saw more deaths than we'd see in a bad flu season. So the virus has not gone away. We do need to learn to live with it because we do not think it's going to completely go away, and that's what endemic means. And part of that means this. As Tina and as other has mentioned, it means learning to live with it. That means, to some extent, it becomes a little bit like the weather, or to put it a different way, you know, tomorrow the weather is supposed to get a whole lot nicer, a whole lot warmer. To me, at least, it seems like we've had a very long, cold, dark winter, and believe me, I'm looking forward to some warm weather, putting away my coat, going outside, having a nice walk. But I'm not putting away my coat, I'm not throwing away my coat. I know that it may very well get cold again. We're only in the beginning of March, and I'm certainly not going to go for a swim tomorrow because no matter how warm it feels, it's not going to be summertime. The virus is like that as well, meaning there'll be times when it'll get worse, and we do expect it'll get worse, and at those times it will make sense to take increasing some measures that people might take. You might wear your mask more often. You might be more careful about where you go. And other times, things will get better. And as things get better, it makes sense to relax measures, as we've been doing. It makes sense to go about as more of a normal life as you can. So there are a lot of things out there that are endemic. You know, Lyme disease is endemic in New Jersey. Endemic doesn't mean gone. It doesn't mean that it is not going to cause us any issues again, but it does, at least to me, mean that we're in a much more controllable spot in an area where we can live much more normally with the virus, but we still need to pay attention. You know, as has been said, eternal vigilance is the price of freedom, and we do need to continue to be vigilant when it comes to this virus, as well as other things may come down the road.
Ed, thank you for that. I seem to recall in that exchange we had a year ago that you had said a bad flu season was about 2,000 deaths in New Jersey, to the best of my recollection. If you look at the past week, we're running at about 3,500 if you just annualize the last week. Not confirmed, but the actual, what the hospitals are reporting. So again, and that's a bad flu season. Pat wanted me to say one thing on your lesson learned, is enhanced IT data monitoring and reporting capabilities in real time to monitoring of evolving trends and status of our hospitals and healthcare systems. We're much more able to do what I just said and Pat wrote for me than we were before this thing. So as has not always been the case, but has more often been the case, Dave, take us home.
Thank you, Governor. With the school mask mandates about to be lifted on Monday, as we know, please recap the guidance that you want district leaders in schools across New Jersey to keep in mind once those masks become optional in a few days. Perhaps, Governor, you as well as the Commissioner could comment on this. What do you want them to remember, to consider, if and when there are COVID spikes in their communities or in their parts of New Jersey? And what do you want parents and students to keep in mind as well with regard to this? And finally, you've touched on this a bit. Are there concerns about a possible sudden emergence of some new dangerous variant that could bring us all back together again as one happy family? Thank you.
Well said. I mean, on the former, I think use your judgment, use your common sense, and prepare for the fact that there may be a bad turn. We don't see it at the moment. This kind of gets to your second question. We discussed the variant earlier. Judy, you should comment on this. The sequencing, I think, showed that we're sort of 3.5% of the cases.
Nationally, 3.5% of the cases are BA2, which is subvariant.
But higher in our region,
We're
right?
higher in our region.
We're sort of something that looks a little bit more like 12%. But it does not appear to be more lethal. There's no evidence it's more lethal.
Not yet.
But you have to, so on schools, use common sense, enjoy the fact the mask isn't on the kids and the educator's face. Make sure you're keeping an eye on the local health reality where you are, which is why we've given them, the districts, the flexibility. If they said, listen, in this particular town or county, it's going south, we can put that back in place. God knows we don't want to do that. And I'd say the basic stuff when you're inside, you just ought to be more cognizant, even whether it's a school or a bar or a restaurant, whatever it might be, than when you're outside. And I think everybody having sort of a willingness to accept that we don't know all that we don't know on this thing, and that we're going to try to navigate this together. And I don't know if there's anything else any of the three health experts want to say on the variant. It's something that I think all health officials are keeping an eye out on, whether it's this variant or other potential variants. This one does not appear to be any more lethal than Omicron, thank God, but anything else you want to add to that?
I just want to remind all leaders, particularly school leaders, be vigilant, resilient, pay attention to the Department of Health's communications and recommendations, and stay in close contact with your local health department.
Okay. So, oh, sorry, I didn't realize you were here. I didn't see you. I apologize.
That's A-okay. Thanks for taking one last question.
David, turns out you didn't take us home.
I know the state and federal guidance has been for those who are most vulnerable to listen to their doctors, but a lot of people have to work. What's your message to the New Jerseyans who are immunocompromised, who have to go out into society and who are feeling anxious about the guidelines that are being scaled back? Is it safe for them to work in our schools and hospitals?
I mean, that's a question that is for health experts. I think they've got to be very careful, I would think, Judy. Someone who's immunocompromised. The good news is, Ed kind of alluded to this, and Tina as well, the good news is it's a lot better than it was, but it's not at zero. And I would say if the advice to everybody is use your common sense and think this through, what's responsible behavior, would be even a more acute recommendation for folks who are immunocompromised in those settings in particular. Judy?
Yeah, I think if you're immunocompromised, work with your healthcare provider. Make sure you mask up, stay away from, get vaccinated and boosted, and if necessary, if that is not boosting your immunity, talk to your doctor about Evelshade and whether you're a candidate for that, and be careful. you will be at risk. There's no doubt about it.
So on behalf of Judy and Pat and Tina and Ed and Tammy and Paramel and Derek and Mahan and Aliana and Alex, Ruth, the whole team, thank you all so much. Keep doing the right thing, folks. God bless you all by the millions. You've come through this together, and it's thanks to you that we're able to say at this point, this is the last COVID briefing we're giving. It was mentioned earlier that it is the woman who needs no introduction's birthday. And Callahan and I have, not surprisingly, got a little something for you, Judy.